Okay, so welcome back to your second week of class. Hopefully you've had a little time over the weekend just to kind of recoup and get geared up for week two. I understand that for some of you, your books are coming in now, so that's good. And then hopefully, if they aren't all in yet, that this week you'll start to see the rest of your textbooks coming in. We'll probably start picking up the pace a little bit on things. And the reason for that is we kind of want to give you as much material up front as we can, mainly just because getting to meet face-to-face is a gift, and we kind of have to cherish every day that we do get to meet face-to-face. And in the event that something were to happen and we don't get to meet face-to-face, then the more we've uploaded earlier on in the semester, the better we may be towards the end of the semester. So we'll probably start picking up the pace of things. Just to kind of refresh you with Schoology, remember you should be checking Schoology once or twice a day along with your email to see if there are messages out there. Once you get into each of your courses, it's going to tell you what you have upcoming. You can see that lesson 1 is due on Wednesday. I know a lot of you have that submitted already, and that's great. On Wednesday morning, right at 8:30 when class starts, I will cover again how to submit that lesson. So if you haven't submitted that lesson yet, as long as you come to class Wednesday morning at 8:30 with it done, I will show you how to submit it again. So don't worry on that. I'd rather you wait until Wednesday to submit it, so that way we know it's submitted correctly, than trying to guess and get it wrong and potentially creating a bigger problem. Also on Wednesday, there's going to be a quiz at 8:30, so just make sure you arrive to class on time, because I do start that on time, and if you come in while others are taking their quiz, it could interrupt somebody else. So just make sure that you show up on time on Wednesday for that quiz. I'll be preparing you for that quiz today. So might be a good day to have a notebook out to take some notes, because the quiz is going to be in Schoology. It's not a doing quiz. It's going to be a multiple choice quiz, and it's going to cover a lot of like shortcuts and shortcut keys, parts of the tool panel, and maybe these are things you know, and maybe these things are things you don't know. And if they're things that you don't know, you should write them down. Otherwise, our agenda for today is I'm going to do a little review of lesson 1. So we're going to be kind of getting back into that lesson. There's a couple of things in there I want to talk about. And then obviously going over things you learned from lesson 1 that you can expect to see on the quiz for Wednesday. And then we're going to do an activity today just outside of the textbook with a photo that I'll provide to you. And we're going to do that in the second half of class. And we'll be testing OneDrive at that point to make sure OneDrive is working and you have access to files and things like that. So all that work we put in last week, we're starting to put in play today. Any questions at all before we get started? Okie dokie then. So let's go ahead and open up that start file from lesson 1. Hopefully you remember where those files are and you can access that easily. If you open up Photoshop, there's a very good chance you're going to see it in its little like recent window. I don't want the one that you're working on though. I want the start one, because I don't want to mess up the one that you're working on. Otherwise, you can go to your Windows Explorer on your PC and go to the folder where you're saving files. For me, it's called a Finder, and my files are in OneDrive. I created a little folder for them for all my lessons, and here's my start file. And then I'm going to go ahead and open that up in Photoshop by dragging and dropping that onto the icon, which I don't think you can do from a PC yet. So being able to find your files is important, because that quickly you should be able to find it, open it, and we're ready to rock and roll. Give you just another 30 seconds or so to find that file. while I'm giving some of you a minute. Random questions, thoughts. Do any of you suffer from fall allergies? Okay, good. I have some people I can empathize with. I don't know about you, but this weekend was horrible. Like something changed within the last 5 days. Something changed. I went outside into our woods and I pretty much became like incapacitated after that. Like I was down and out with a total full-blown allergy attack. And usually it takes at that point it takes a shower to get rid of it and time. So if I ever come in and my eyes are like swollen and bloodshot, it's allergies. Okay, it looks like we're all good. Anyone need more time? Perfect. So there's a part in your lesson where they had you create a little box or banner here at the bottom, and then they had you cut part of it out. I want to redo that with you the way they did it. We're not going to use your book. We're going to go from memory. What I like about the book is it's going to show you how to do something. What I don't like about the book is when you rely so much on the reading and the doing, like over and over. Like the point of the book is to show you how to do something. And then after that, you want to try and do it on your own and apply what you learned. So we're going to try and apply what you learned to that. So first off, you have if you don't see your layers panel, go ahead and view your layers panel and make sure you bring that up so you can see your layers. That's very important in Photoshop. Let me just kind of show you what I got going on here. Got some other panels. Let me move this window. So I've got like all these other panels, and I'm just going to dock some stuff. I'm going to clean some stuff up by redocking them. And that's one thing you would have learned in lesson 1. You learned about panels that you can undock them and redock them by dragging the tab, and you'll see a blue bar, and that's going to let you redock them. So your layers panel might be one that's docked over here, and maybe you just don't know what the icon looks like yet, which I'll go redock mine. It looks like 2 little sheets of paper stacked on one another. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what it is. Anytime I'm telling you to go open a panel and you don't see it, you're going to go up to your Windows menu bar, and that's where you're going to find it. And there are going to be times that happens. There are often times I don't see my layers panel, mainly because I might have undocked it, and then in a hurry, I hit the X button to get rid of it. I do that a lot if I'm in a hurry. And then the next time I don't see it, so I have to go back to Window, Layers, and bring it back. The layers panel is one of those that's so popular, they even gave it a shortcut key, like your F7 key, that you can hit to bring it back. Well, for me on mine, that doesn't work. I probably have to hold down my function key. There we go. I can't just hit F7. I have to, on my Mac keyboard, there's a function key. It's above your arrow keys on the keyboard. There's the FN, so I gotta hold that down to hit F7. It's not really a shortcut, I remember. I usually just go Window, Layers to bring it back. Okay. So with my layers panel, you should have a ribbons layer that the eye icon is turned off. So this is one thing you need to know, that little eye icon turns on and off the visibility of layers. Super important, super helpful. The other thing you need to know about the layers panel is they're all about a stacking order. The layer on top, that's how it stacks. Imagine like you're stacking books, okay? The book on the bottom, if I put another book on top, starts to cover it. If I put another one on top, it starts to cover it, it starts to cover it. If I rearrange them where you can see pieces of one book, that's exactly what's happening here. The layers panel is a stacking order of what comes on top of another. So in this ribbons layer, do you see how there's the blue ribbon that says happy birthday, and then behind the blue ribbon is like a white and gray checkerboard? That checkerboard means transparency. So that's why I can see everything else underneath of it, because that's transparent. There's nothing in that layer in those pieces, allowing me to see what's in the rose layer in those other pieces. Okay? So that's the layers panel with those two couple of things. Now I just want you to watch up at the screen for a bit. I'm going to show you something, and then we're going to do it. There was part of the tutorial where they had you use your rectangular marquee, and they had you draw a box, right? And then they had you grab your brush tool. I'm going to hit B on my keyboard to get to my brush tool. I'm just going to paint red. I don't care what color they told you to color in. That's irrelevant at this point. And then I'm going to color. Notice that because I drew the marquee tool, it doesn't let me go outside the lines, which is nice. It lets me color quickly. However, I have a problem. Can anyone look at my layers panel and tell me what my problem is? I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. I'll be going over these shortcuts in a second. Okay. Why is that a problem? You're right. You're on the right track.
It's because we're supposed to be working with the ribbon layer and the red that you just painted is directly on top of the rose. So if you were to like remove the visibility of the rose layer, then it would also remove the red spot.
Yeah, so maybe that's not a problem. Right now, technically, it's not a problem. I could have continued, finished this. I don't need to hide the visibility of the rose layer. That's not a problem. However, let's say my boss comes back to me and says, not the red, okay, we needed that to be blue. Can I change that easily? And the answer to that is no, I cannot. Can I change it? Yes. Can I change it easily? No. This is destructive. This is destructive. I have literally put that red in the rose layer. Like I've changed the rose layer. So whatever I do now, I can't erase it. If I try to erase it, well, I'm erasing the rose layer as well. This is what destructive editing is. So what should I have done? So I'm going to undo that. Oh, here's a great time for me to start with some shortcut. Does anyone remember the shortcut key to undo? Let's see if I can write this on my board so it's visible. Undo. On a PC, it's Control Z. On a Mac, it's Command Z. It's a little Apple. That's the Command key. We'll get to that one, but on a quiz, by the way, I'm going to ask you what the shortcut key is to undo, and I'm going to give you both. It's going to say Control Z on a PC or Command Z on a Mac. I'm not going to try and trick you and say something like it's Control Z on a PC and Option Z on a Mac. I'm not going to do that. If you know it's Control Z, then whatever I'm giving you for the Mac version is the correct answer. So I'm going to hit undo there so that I get rid of when I put the red color on. And what I should have done is either I think the lesson had you do this, right? They had you select the ribbons layer, and then they had you paint that, right? So it's on the ribbons layer. Does that sound right? Okay, me personally, I wouldn't have done that either. I still think that runs into problems. It renders me problems. Because if my client comes back and says, we need to change the color of that bottom box, I can't do that easily. I still have to somehow reselect that box. And some of you might be saying, well, you could reselect that box. You could come up here and grab your, what tool am I looking for? My quick select tool, which, where are you? Quick select tool. You have moved on me. Here we go. I could grab my quick select tool and I could try and select it that way, which it didn't even like. It grabbed that and that. I don't want this guy though. See if I can unquick select this. So that's not super quick. Actually it was, okay, let me back that up. It took me like 10 seconds to get that selected, and you might be thinking, that was super quick. It's not. It should be instant. If I have to do a little bit of work, that took too long, because that also just opened the door for mistakes. Like I may not have realized this was selected, or I may not have realized I over selected or under selected. It just opens the doors for mistake. I don't like that. Personally, I'm gonna Command Z a bunch again to get back to this. I think this should have been on its own layer. And then, oops, let's try that again. Back to my brush tool. Then I could have filled this in, deselected. And then if my boss says, hey, we need to change the color of that, look at this. I'm gonna Command click on this thumbnail, done. Done. I just hit a bunch of shortcut keys there. Let me show you what they are. Okay, undo, deselect. Okay, and delete this layer. So let's do this together. You should be selected on the rose layer. I want you to go ahead and hit the new layer button at the bottom of your layers panel, and I want to make a new layer above the rose layer. If you don't have your marquee showing up anymore, put it back. Actually, let's do this. If you do have your marquee showing up, let's deselect it. If you've already filled it, hit Command Z. If you see your marquee and it's got like the marching ants, Command Z. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Command Z, it's Control Z. Aaron, we're gonna mess this up. Hit Control Z on your PC to undo so that the fill goes away. It should take a step back. You might have to hit it a couple of times. There we go, Kate. Once you see the marching ants, you're gonna see it should look like this. I'm gonna call them marching ants. It's just the selection, and it's kind of doing its little moving thing. Hit Control D. Another shortcut key I want you to know. And that's to deselect. Deselect is Control D on your keyboard, or Command D on a Mac. D for deselect. That's an important shortcut key. It allows you to work quicker. All right, go ahead and draw that marquee box there again. Make sure in your layers panel, you're still selected on layer 1. If you had to hit some undos, it may have moved you to a different layer. Hit B on your keyboard to get to your brush tool. That's going to activate your brush so you can start painting inside of this, just like the book had showed you. Now, the only thing to do this quicker is your brush might be tiny. If you're working with a tiny brush, you're going to get frustrated. Like, it's going to take you, again, longer. To increase and decrease the size of your brush, it's your bracket keys. The bracket key that looks like this guy and this guy. The left bracket will make that brush smaller. The right bracket will make it bigger. Just make that brush bigger so that all you really have to do is do one swipe and it's done. Again, I don't care what color it's filling with. Go ahead and hit Command D to deselect. You're done. Now this is where your boss or your client come back and says, either A, I don't like it, or B, I changed my mind. Either way, we got to keep our composure, because sometimes we've made the decisions and what we think we like, and we might personally really like the color we've chosen. And to hear somebody else say, I don't like it, can, I don't know, sting us a little bit, but we got to get used to that. Like, that's okay. And now we're going to change it. So to load that marquee selection again, I'm going to hold down, see, for me it's Command, but I'm guessing, so I got to guess because I don't know for sure on a PC. I would Command click on this little thumbnail here in my layers panel, and that's going to load it. So I'm guessing it's Control click for you on your PC. Does that sound right? Okay. So go ahead and Control click on that thumbnail. When you Control click on a thumbnail, it loads everything in that thumbnail. That's why I like these on their own layers. The book had that ribbon, the top ribbon and the bottom ribbon on the same layer. By the way, I don't know if the book will ever teach you about Control clicking on the thumbnail. So that's one. If you're like, hey, I did not know that, that is definitely one to write down because that is a lifesaver, especially when you get to more advanced professional style editing, because I don't recall if the book ever teaches you that in any lesson. And if I would have done this the way the book showed me, by doing the ribbon on the same layer, both ribbons on the same layer, when I would have Control clicked on that thumbnail, it would have selected both ribbons and I could change the color of just one. I'd really, well, yeah, you could and you couldn't. You couldn't change it the way I'm going to show you. It would just take a little bit extra work. And in this industry, it's really about working quicker. So that Command click is huge. It loads that, it reloads that selection. Let me show you how you can change the color without having to paint it over again, because I think that's slow too. So my marquee is up because I reselected it. I want you to go over to your tools panel, right? This is my tools panel. Here's another quiz question that I want you to know right here. These colors, this is really important. Let me zoom into this area. In your tools panel, you have two colors. One is on top of the other one, always. Like if I click on one, they don't switch. One is always on top of the other one. The top one is called your foreground color. The back one is called your background color. So you need to know the difference between these two. I also think it's okay if you hover over it and let it tell you what it's called, that's fine too. Here's why I'm really specifying this. Does anyone know what they're called in Illustrator? They look very similar in Illustrator. The only difference is in Illustrator, I think the top one is still filled in, but the back one is like this because it's a little bit different. So does anyone know what they're called in Illustrator? In Illustrator, this would be a fill color and a stroke color. One says what color to fill it with. The bottom one would say what color to color the outside edge, which is called a stroke. I can't tell you how many students get this wrong on a quiz. I would say more or less they get it wrong on Aaron's quiz because they're used to Photoshop and they want to call it a foreground color and a background color. It's Illustrator they're not as comfortable with. And so in Illustrator, they want to call it a foreground color and a background color, and that's incorrect. In Illustrator, it's a fill color and a stroke color. And why it's really important that I clarify that, because that can be the same case here. There's times in Photoshop that I can work with fill color and stroke color, and I just want you to make sure you know that difference. So, cancel this. I want you to go click on the foreground color, which is the top one. That's gonna load your color picker. And I want you just to pick a different color than the one it loaded it with. And I don't care which one. Mine was red, so I'll go somewhere in the green family. And I'm gonna hit okay. Here's what I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about this looking good, okay? Would I, in real life, be choosing these odd colors? No way, Jose. In fact, maybe I should make this a little bit more real life. Go ahead and hit I on your keyboard. What tool did that just activate? Your eyedropper. What does your eyedropper do? It will sample a color and choose it. Why do you think, so let's go ahead. So go ahead and sample a color off your artboard. That's gonna now fill your foreground color with the color you just sampled. For design principles, this is a much better method because now I've just, instead of me picking a color, that's probably gonna clash because the saturation levels are gonna be different and everything else. At least sampling a color, I know I'm choosing a color that might unify a little bit better. And there's one of those design principle words you've been learning about. So now I have this new fill color in my area here, and I'm gonna fill it by hitting Option Delete on my keyboard. Hold on a second before you do that. That's my Mac keyboard. I do not know the PC shortcuts. So this is where we're gonna have to maybe experiment a little bit. So let me tell you what keys I'm hitting. I have a foreground and a background. Option Delete fills with my foreground. Command Delete fills with my background. I'm just gonna write that down so I don't forget. I do get those two backwards sometimes. I'm sorry, Kaylee, but I'm probably writing this on this area in the board you can't see. So I'm trying to Google. Option plus delete. Fills with foreground. Command plus delete. Fills with background. That's my Mac keyboard or my Mac. So let's figure out what it is on a PC. Go ahead and try and hit Option Delete. Does it change the color? Tim? So it did fill it, and it looks like it filled it here. And that was Option Delete? Alt Delete. So on a PC, Alt Delete fills with your foreground. So let's see if we can figure out how to get the background. So for most of you, your background color is probably white. What do you have to hit to get that color? You have to make sure it's selected again. What did you hit there, Tim? Okay, on your PC then, Alt Delete will fill with your foreground color. Control Delete will fill with your background color. You will forget that shortcut. This is gonna take time and practice to get that one down. But I can't tell you how often I use that one. That's a big one. It saves me a lot of time to fill colors and to choose and to experiment, to sample. Because watch up at the board how quickly I can investigate and make a decision. I don't like that color. I change. Option Delete. I don't like that color. I change. Option Delete. I don't like that color. I change. Option Delete. I don't like that one. Option Delete. I don't like that one. Option. Yay, I like it. Do you see? That's how quickly I can experiment, test. If you had to paint that in every single time, it would have taken you 10 times as long. That one's not going to be on the quiz just yet because this is not anything covered in lesson 1. This is just me giving you my professional experience on, hey, this is how you should operate Photoshop professionally. So if you don't know those shortcut keys, I definitely write those ones down. They're really, really handy and they're really beneficial. If you still have the marquee up, go ahead and hit Control D. I don't care what color you've chosen, but that's that. Brianna. Whoa, did it fill your whole artboard? Okay, let's see if we can do this together so I can have somebody else work with this. I like stuff like this because this is how we learn. I'm gonna see if I can do it without catching anyone. Yeah, that happened? Kind of? Ah, So when Brianna hit Alt Delete, it filled her whole space and not just changed the color of her ribbon. Any idea what happened? Yeah, look at what layer I have selected. These two are on their own layer. All right, that is gonna make me happy. You hit. Oh, let's do control. All right. Oh, so this, for some reason, instead of it just being a ribbon, it's a whole layer. Yes, let's do control again. That. Okay. Let's delete it. Probably easier just to delete it, and you can just click on the trash can. It's probably easier just to delete it than try and get rid of the color. Let's make a new layer again. Now make a marquee box. And now hit Control. Or Option Delete, whichever you want. So you okay, let's go inside lesson 1 there. Oh, that is in OneDrive. So where are you saving this? This would be your personal space, not mine.
Hold on.
Are they in? Okay, that's okay, that's your D. There's that. I don't see it there either. What else is in OneDrive? Okay. Let's go from Photoshop. Let's close that. Maybe that's where you were. Let's go File. Can you go Open Recent? Oh, you don't have an Open Recent on a PC. Okay, let's just go Open then. Oh, right there's Photoshop lessons. Where did those go? Okay, hit OK. Let's go back to Windows Explorer. That is it just wherever those lessons were, I don't think they were in OneDrive. I think you had them someplace outside of OneDrive. This PC. Nope. I have no idea where those were. Just search lessons. All right, let's go back to Photoshop. We got to try and figure out where those were that we saw them. So let's close that again. Let's go back to Photoshop and File Open. It's somewhere in a quick access. Cancel. Back to a Windows Explorer. That's where you can browse the files. Quick access. There they are. Open that, double click that. Can you move that into your homework folder? I don't want them in your homework folder though. That's for me. They should go in a place that's for you. So move them in your there you go. That way you can find. So that was the problem is you had them, you just didn't know where they were, so you couldn't find them easily. So coming up with that system on where to put your files so you know where to find them easily is super important. So right now you don't have those in a Photoshop folder. So my guess is when you come to like Illustrator class, you're gonna run into the same problem. Where are those files? And if you move those into the same folder, now you're gonna have two things called lessons. You're definitely gonna want to create a Photoshop folder and put those in it. So that way they don't get messed up. And then you can open up that start file. Okay. Just figuring out, troubleshooting some things with some students. Kaylee, if you have any questions at any point in time, make sure you just unmute yourself and either tell me to slow down or ask whatever question that you may have. If you're putting it in the chat, Kaylee, I may not see it right away, so just don't be afraid to unmute yourself.
That's okay. I think I'm all good right now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
All right. That's where I want to stop with this part of lesson 1. The only other thing I guess I want to say with what they had you do is, you know, they had you use the marquee tool to make this ribbon. Actually, no, I don't want to stop there. There was another piece that I think messed up some people. We're back to this point where you have this ribbon. You should be on the layer where this ribbon is. You should have 3 layers. If you have more than 3 layers and you have wasted layers, sometimes when you use type, that happens. Just, you can delete those extra layers. What else did the lesson have you do to this bottom ribbon? Yeah, they had you cut a triangle out of the left side of it. Do you remember what tool they had you use to make the triangle? Yeah, I think it was, now that you say that. I think it was the polygonal lasso tool. That lasso tool draws in straight lines. And I think they then at that point had you like click, 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 and then go back up to the starting point. You should see a circle that tells you you're gonna complete that shape. And then you just hit your delete key, right? Done and done. All right, here's the only thing I didn't like about that. I'm gonna zoom in. There was like 0 measurements to that. And they kind of taught you this like, eyeball it mentality, and that's really not how designers work. Designers are super precise. If you get all wonky with that lasso tool, so that I see it happens all the time, Kate, like if it gets all wonky like that and you just, it's out of control, just double click. And it should turn into a mark. And then you can just hit Command D, deselect. Perfect. Okay. Me personally, I probably, I would not be working zoomed out. I would be working zoomed in. Here's a great quiz question that's going to be on your quiz. How do you zoom in and out quickly? Control plus. Any guess what that would be on a Mac? Command plus, yeah. So hit Control plus a few times to zoom in to this area. Now here's the other thing I'm doing. I have to apologize. I work so quickly sometimes. I sometimes forget that I'm hitting keys and I'm not telling you what keys I'm hitting. So I'm hitting my Command plus. For you, it's Control plus to zoom in. It may have zoomed you in the wrong spot. I hold down my space bar. That turns into a hand symbol. Is that what it does for you too? The space bar? Then I can take that and mouse to the area I want to go. Why do you think zooming into this area is important? What can that allow you to do more accurately? Make a more precise selection. That's usually the #1 thing new Photoshop students are doing, is they're working too far away. Like when I say too far away, too far zoomed out, and your selections then are not precise. At this point in time, I don't worry about being zoomed in 500%. Because here's the thing, if I'm zoomed in 500% and it looks pretty good, it's gonna look great then at 100%. So zooming in is really important when I'm editing or trying to make selections. That way I know it's gonna look good when it's printed at 100%. Because now I can see exactly where that corner is, and I can make sure when I'm drawing my, there, I just even did it. So just double, I can make sure that I'm gonna cross that right at the corner. Because when I was zoomed out, I wasn't hitting it right at the corner. I was kind of down or above. And now I can make sure I cross it right exactly at the corner. When it comes to editing, there's no close. Close is not good. You need to, as much as I hate the word perfection, when it comes to being a designer, unfortunately, perfection, OCD, attention to detail, they're actually a really important part of our jobs to have that perfection. Now, the other part that I'm not super fond of is I really don't know where the middle is, right? Where's center? So go ahead and double click to maybe make a marquee, hit Command D to deselect. Let's start over. So we've got nothing there. I'm gonna drag down a ruler guide to kind of help me out, right? You probably don't see your rulers up here. Hit Control R on your keyboard to get to your rulers. That one's not on the quiz, but it's still an important one. Control R will let you see your rulers. And then if I drag one down, I can bring that down here partway. I would love it to tell me where my center is, but the way I have made this shape, it's probably not going to.
Mine snapped to the center of it.
I wonder if you have, let's go view. I'm looking at my snap to. Let me turn on my snap. Let's see if that does it. Is it selected? It snaps. Did your ruler snap to the center of it, or just when you're drawing the line?
No,
Yeah, my ruler is not snapping. Oh, there it kind of did. Okay, I was just going too fast. I was too impatient. Okay, so let me undo that. If yours is not snapping, I had to go view snap to turn on my snap feature. Sometimes the snap feature bothers me and I turn it off, especially when I want like super precise. So I turn on my snap feature, and then when I drag a ruler down slowly, it should kind of snap to the center. And now I can go back again, and I should be able to click off, come back in, hit my delete key, and deselect, and have a much more accurate banner that is precisely measured. It'll be balanced, top and bottom, and hopefully I get the sharp corners because I've zoomed in close enough. By the way, this is destructive, which I wouldn't have done it this way, but the book, the way I would have done it is too advanced to show you right now. So the book is we're just teaching you the tools, but it's destructive. And you might be asking, well, what do you mean? How is it destructive? You have to think that everything a client could come back and say, change this. What if the client were to come back and say, I don't like how sharp you made that banner. It's not the same as this one. Can you make it less sharp? And my thought would be, crap. Like I pretty much have to redo that. Down the road, you'll learn a way that'll maybe make that less destructive. All right, awesome. I covered a pile of things, a lot of shortcuts. I'm gonna keep covering some more, but I wanna give you guys a break. Let's reconvene at 9:30. So that's just shy of 15 minutes because it's 9:17 according to my computer. So go do what you need to do and then be back by 9:30 and we're gonna continue on with a different activity. We're done with this, by the way. You can close this out. You don't have to save. So I'm just gonna exit out. Got my marquee doing cool, crazy stuff. So I'll close, don't save. Go ahead and leave your computer right there. Set your timer if you need to, and I'll see you back at 9:30. About one more minute of break time. Okay. Let me get my monitors back up. So for the second half of class, I want to do an activity to kind of start preparing you for lesson 2. I'm actually assigning lesson 2 today. However, it's not due until a week from Wednesday. But I'm assigning it today to give you time to prepare and plan because on Wednesday this week, I'm also assigning lesson 3. So as you can see here in Schoology, you have 2 lessons that are due next Wednesday. You have 1 lesson due this Wednesday, which is lesson 1. And then you have 2 lessons that are due next Wednesday, lessons 2 and 3. So just plan accordingly for those. That's that kind of little bit of push that we have to do just to get things moving along. Otherwise, after that, it's only 1 lesson a week that's due, and they're always going to be due on Wednesdays. So that's something you can prepare for is Wednesdays is kind of lessons are due that day at 8:30. So kind of keeping that in the back of your mind. So if you have free time, maybe start working on lesson 2 in your evenings if you've got some time to work on some homework, because hopefully maybe things aren't piled on right now. Okay. Without any further ado, then let's go ahead and jump back in. There's a file I want you to open up for this activity that we're going to work on in lesson 2. So let's see how well we can find it. Anything that I want you to open that's from me is going to be in the OneDrive, and it's going to be in that folder that's called like swtc.edu because it's from Katie Anderson. And from there, you should be going into that Katie Anderson GWD classes folder, and you should see a whole bunch of folders in there. One folder, it's a folder for every class essentially. So you need to find the class that you're in, which is Photoshop. Almost everything I'm going to have you open is going to be in the activities folder. And let's go to the lesson 1 folder there, actually. I want you to open the doors picture. So go ahead and open that picture. Can anyone tell me what file extension that picture is? .jpg, what is that? It's a JPEG. Is that a native Photoshop file? Kind of a tough question. We haven't learned this yet, so I'm just seeing if anyone knows. It's not. This is not a native Photoshop file. So if you double clicked it to open, it will not open in Photoshop because it's not native to Photoshop. So I think it's really important to understand. Does anyone know the file extension that is native to Photoshop? Nope. Good guess though. Tim? .psd. That's a quiz question you're going to want to know for Wednesday. What's the file extension that's native to Photoshop? And it's .psd. Maybe you noticed in your lessons when you open those, if I can go back to a lesson semi-quickly, Photoshop lessons, all your lessons will be .psd. So if you double click those, yes, they should open in Photoshop because they're native to Photoshop. So it's really important to know what we mean when a native file. It just means that's the software it's meant to open in. Does anyone know the extension for Illustrator? If .psd is Photoshop, any guesses for Illustrator? AI, Adobe Illustrator. Photoshop, I think, is, well, PS, Photoshop, the D's document. PSD, Photoshop document. Okay, back to GWD classes, Photoshop, activity, lesson 1. We're opening up the Doors JPEG. It's not native to Photoshop, so I either have to tell it to open up in Photoshop, or I don't know if you can drag and drop to Photoshop. That, or you have to go and open Photoshop and go file open and search for it from Photoshop. For me, I can just drag and drop it on top of Photoshop. It's kind of nice. And that should open. There we go. Kaylee, did you have any trouble finding those files from OneDrive?
No, I'm good.
Perfect. Awesome. Glad that worked. Okay. So here we are. We have this 2 doors file that's open here in Photoshop. If I do a quick peek at lesson 2, just some things you're going to be covering when you start lesson 2 is like understanding image resolution and size. That is a huge conversation that we're going to actually start on Wednesday. You're going to be talking about cropping and straightening an image, so we'll look at that here now. You're going to be adjusting tonal ranges, and you're going to start using things like a healing brush, a content aware patch, clone stamp, and things like that in lesson 2. So lesson 2 is where you're going to start some photo editing. However, editing photos in Photoshop is not the only thing that Photoshop can do. I want to make sure we understand that. Photoshop is not just for editing photographs, although that's what most people think. You can build websites in Photoshop. You can build designs in Photoshop. You can do 3D packaging in Photoshop. Its bread and butter is photo editing, but it can do way, way, way more than that. So just make sure we do understand that Photoshop is much greater than just editing photographs. Okay, let's start with a good crop. In the left-hand side there, I want you to find your crop tool. It's probably the 1, 2, 3, 5th one down. When you have your crop tool, it's going to allow you just to manually drag and decide how you want to crop. Now mine's being weird. And that's being weird because every tool I select gives me options in the options bar for that tool. And apparently the last time I used my crop tool, I sized it for 1080 by 1080. My guess is I was doing something for Instagram, because Instagram is 1080 by 1080. So that's probably why I have that there. So I'm going to go ahead and clear those out. And maybe that will revert that back. There we go. So now that's how yours looks. And so you could go ahead and crop this to be whatever size you want it to be. I don't think I have ever cropped like that. I don't ever come in here and just decide willy-nilly, oh, I like this. This looks good. Why? Because as a designer, I don't ever get that decision. Everything is pretty much predetermined by my client. My client has hired me to do something for them, and they have, based on what that is, I have to crop it for what they need. mean, you just saw how I had to square in 1080 by 1080. Again, even though I might have been doing something for myself, I had to think about its intention and what its end purpose was for. Its end purpose is for Instagram. I had to crop it to what Instagram prefers. And so you always have to know that. So I don't think I ever just come out here and decide. I think I always, from the crop tool, I come up to the options bar and I choose what I need. So let's say you need this to be 5 by 7. In your first setting there's an option that you can choose. Some presets. I prefer the width by height by resolution. And with that setting, I always tell it exactly what I want. Like I get full control of these decisions. And because I get full control of these decisions, I have to tell it what it is, which is width by height by resolution. You see 3 empty squares there. So I have to type all of that in, width by height by resolution. So I said 5 by 7. Can anyone tell me if this photo is portrait or landscape? It is landscape, meaning it's long. So I need to look at those terms, 5 by 7, and I need to pick the longest number, and that comes first. Because it's width by height by resolution. If I were to put the 7 there, it would recrop this to be portrait, which I guess if that's what I want, then that's what I need to do. But I want to keep this landscape. So I'm going to type 5 by 7. Well, there I just typed wrong. I needed to type 7 by 5, 7 by 5. I could have just hit these little arrows. That would swap it, right? So I want 7 by 5. Now the last number is resolution. And I'm going to talk more about this on Tuesday, but I'm just going to throw 2 numbers up on the board. These are not part of your quiz for Wednesday. Wednesday's quiz is more or less on lesson 1, not lesson 2. We haven't even done lesson 2 yet. I'm just kind of prepping for that. Remember on the first day, we learned about this word, or maybe it was the second day, we learned about this word called pixels. Photoshop is built using pixels. So we need to then worry about something called resolution, which is essentially image quality. And there's really 2 different sets of numbers that we aim for. I could put any number for the resolution, but there's kind of 2 numbers that we aim for. One is 72 ppi, which means pixels per inch. So it's going to put 72 little squares per inch. And then another one is 300 ppi, or 300 pixels per inch, which means there's going to be 300 little pixels per 1 square inch. Out of those 2, do you know which one's going to give you more detail? The one with more pixels per inch or the one with less pixels per inch? More detail. Tim? 300. The more pixels you can fit in per inch, the better the detail you're going to get. So that number, the one that has the higher number, 300 pixels per inch, is for print. Anything that's going to be printed, if its end goal is to print, that's what I need to aim for. 72 pixels per inch is for web or digital viewing. So that Instagram one you saw that I had up, the 1080 by 1080 with the resolution of 72, was for Instagram, digital viewing. No one's going to print that. That's my resolution. Okay, next question. Out of these 2 numbers, which one do you think is going to create a larger file size? 72 pixels per inch or 300 pixels per inch? And this is one where if you use some rational thinking, you're probably on the right track. Why do you think 72, Rihanna? Okay. Okay. I absolutely understand where you're coming from. So let's take that piece out of it. Let's not think about the work that might go into doing it. Let's think about image quality. Which one did we say produces a higher image quality? Tim, which one did we say? 300 produces a higher image quality because there's more pixels packed. More pixels is kind of more data, right? So this one is going to actually be a higher file size because there's there's 4 times as many pixels slammed into that as the other one. So that's going to take a larger file space. I have worked with Photoshop files, especially if they're meant for print, that have been like gigabytes in file size. Especially if you have to print like one of those, you're doing something that's for a large banner, like the roadside banners, a billboard. We're talking massive files. Simply because of this, how many pixels are kind of slammed in per inch. Okay. So I'm gonna, now we have to decide, or we have to ask our client, what is this meant for? This is meant for, let's say this is meant for print. So we're gonna put 300 in, because it's meant for print. Tab. By the way, I hit my tab key to go from spot to spot instead of using my mouse. And once I've done that and I've entered in my information, it's showing me down here what I have, and it's kind of cutting out some of the sides, right? Because it's showing me this is what a 5x7 is going to do. So I can move this to keep the part that I want to keep. And I'm kind of looking at the doors, and maybe I want to keep those doors like dead center the way they are. So I'm going to try and do that. And I'm using my mouse to try and move that back and forth. But if my mouse is not being like detailed enough, I thought I could use my arrow keys, but this is not liking my arrow keys right now. And then once I'm happy with that, I could hit my return key or enter key on your PC. I might have to hit it twice. Okay, I did something. Oh, I see what I did. This is where you gotta make these lovely mistakes. Anyone else? You might look at mine and be like, where the heck did that go? It's there. No worries. There she be. In a very simplified version. Can anyone tell me what happened? I see I'm not the only one. Happened to Kate too, right? What happened? I love when stuff like this happens because this is gonna happen to you and you need to like, where's the first place I should go to look? It's gotta be something with my dimensions, right? It has to be, like that's the only logical thing. Tim, what happened? I made it 7 pixels by 5 pixels because the last thing I worked in was pixels. And I forgot to change it to inches. And I didn't really specify to you either. I just said 5x7. Well, my head knows that was inches, but I didn't verbally say it was inches. So I need the command Z because I'm glad this happened. Because I can't just go and change this and redo it. No, the problem is what I've done here was destructive. I have just taken this image that was probably nice and large and I made it teeny, 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 weeny. I destroyed it. I deleted all those other pixels. They're gone. So if I now try to go and fix that and make it big again, can't happen. It's good. I'll do it. 7 inches by 5 inches. Perfect. It's gonna say 7 by 5. My resolution looks strange. It's probably not even gonna like want me to do it. There it is. It's back. But here's what it looks like now. That's because I literally got rid of all those pixels. And so then it tried to make it larger again with what few pixels I had left. That's one thing with resolution. I can go from big to small. This is going to be a Wednesday conversation, but it's the most important thing about resolution that I can tell you. I can go from big to small. I cannot go from small to big. So I'm glad this happened so you could directly see that. Okay, because it's going to happen to you. A client's going to give you a photo they want you to use, and the photo is going to be teeny weeny, and they're going to say, oh, and I want that on a billboard. That's what's going to happen, that blurry picture you just saw. So Control Z, if this happened to you as well, let's just go ahead and Control Z, pretty much back to, I just hit it a pile of times just to get back to open. Another thing you could do, if that happens and you don't know how many times you hit Control Z, you can use your history panel and just go back to open. Here it's showing me what I all did. And I can just go back to open. Perfect. And I'm just going to do that again. I want to move it though. That's the crop. And I want a little bit more of my door on this side. Great. Enter, enter, done. That looks better. Okay. With your crop tool still selected, going to move some of my panels here. Okay, with your crop tool still selected, up in your options bar, you see something called straighten. If I choose that straighten tool, like if I depress it, I can take that and I'm going to figure out something on here that I think should be straight. Like I have to look at this and determine what do I think is straight. And this is where it gets really tricky because there's a lot of things going on in here. If I choose this power line as straight, guess what? It's probably straight. And then it might make the doors look crooked. So I really have to figure out what I absolutely want to be straight. And I guess for me, it is the doors. I want the doors to look straight. So I'm going to drag it from here to here. And you can see it's actually pretty much straight. It doesn't really need fixing. However, if I were to grab the straighten tool again and decide, I'm gonna undo that. If I were to grab the straighten tool again and decide, hey, I want this blue bar at the bottom to be straight. And if I were to drag it from this spot to this spot, then it would make that straight. But it might in the end turn something else to look crooked. Now my doors are actually a little slanted, like they're going downhill a little bit. I'm just gonna accept that. And I have to decide, is that the look I'm going for? And I would say for me, no. It looks like it's going downhill. And so I can fix it by grabbing my straighten tool again. I'm just kind of looking at this now. This is what's bothering me. So that's the straighten tool. The only thing that was nice with what I did by kind of straightening that back and forth again is, I mean, it did kind of crop out a little bit more of that sidewalk area. Maybe I don't like that though. That's where I'd have to kind of do some undos to get some of that sidewalk back if it cut out more than what I wanted it to. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing, and then I'm just going to let you guys play around for about 20 minutes or so, because I think that's how you really start to learn Photoshop, is just playing around. So I'm going to show you a couple of tools, and I'm going to let you play around because some of you know a little bit more Photoshop. So just watch up at the board for this. I'm not going to worry about my layers panel. I'm going to let everything that I do here be destructive. So that's the first thing I want you to know. So I really don't need to worry about my layers panel, so I'm just actually going to redock it. As far as your editing tools, this is kind of where you're going to live in, are the editing tools here. This is a quiz question for Wednesday. You need to know what this little bitty triangle means at the bottom of a tool. So if you see a tool that has this tiny little triangle down there, that means there are more tools hidden underneath of it. So if I press and hold, here's the spot healing brush, the patch tool, and other things. As far as how they all work a little bit differently. The spot healing brush pretty much lets me sample a spot and then try and get rid of it. Actually, this one does not let me sample. The spot healing brush just lets me paint. So I just paint. Like, hey, I want to get rid of that. and it tries to get rid of it as best as can. That's the spot healing brush. Pretty easy. All I have to do is pick something I want to get rid of, paint it, she gone. The healing brush works quite similar, only instead I have to sample something first. And I can be like, all right, I want you to sample this spot, and I want you to get rid of this object. And you can see how there's a plus sign following what I'm erasing. And that's a little harder. So it's actually copying this sort of and putting it here. To sample, I have to hold down my Option Alt key. Yours would probably be Alt. I alt and click to sample, and then I paint. Let's not use that one right now. We're gonna actually probably do an activity with something more like this on Wednesday, because this one takes some skill and more instruction. Patch tool. Patch tool lets me drag an area that I want to patch, right? And then I move this to an area that I want to clone. Now I moved it to an area that had some stripes there, and so it cloned the stripes. You got to be cautious with that. That's the patch tool. Again, I just drag a circle, move it. So if I move it to an area like this, it's going to try and put that blue there. It tries to fix it, but not so good. So when you're playing around, Control Z is going to be your friend, and Control D to deselect is going to be your friend. Those are actually the two that I'm going to stick with. Probably the patch tool, the spot healing brush will be two areas that we're going to kind of stick around with. The other area that you can play around with will be your adjustments panel. So go ahead and click over on the right-hand side and find your adjustments panel. I'm going to let you kind of play around with this one too. So if you want to try and, I'll just go to this hue saturation. You can play around with these different adjustment panels and see what they do. The adjustments panel are nice. This is all non-destructive editing, by the way. Because if I go back to my layers panel, it put that adjustment on its own layer. So at any point in time, I can get rid of it to get back, or I can click it to change it. That's non-destructive editing. Okay, recap. We talked a little bit about cropping and straightening. We already did that together. The second part here, I'm gonna let you play around with for 20 minutes or so. And the areas you're gonna play around with are either the adjustments panel, and you can do some fun things there just to experiment. That's how you learn. Or in the editing area over here by using the spot healing brush or the patch tool. And you can try and maybe get rid of some things or just see how that goes. I'll let you play. I'll stop you about 5 minutes, 10 minutes before class is over, and I'll go over any last things I need you to know for the quiz on Wednesday. So if you get stuck or you have a question or you're trying to do something and it's not working and you need help, just raise your hand and I'll come over and help you. Okay. Okay, let me pop my monitors back on while I'm doing that. You can close out what you're working on unless you've got something you're excited about and you want to save. That's totally up to you, but I don't need it, so you can close it without saving if you prefer. So as I mentioned, you have a quiz Wednesday morning. It's pretty much over lesson 1, and there's a few other items that I want to go over that I see I don't have kind of checked off that we've talked about. So pretty much things we've talked about as far as how you zoom in and out, how the shortcut key to undo, The foreground color versus background color and things like that are part of the exam. Some other things that I want to make sure I mention that will be on the exam are some of the tools you used in lesson 1. So you should know what they are. You should be able to identify them. You use the marquee tools. So you should be able to identify those. What are the marquee tools used for? So Tim? Selections, perfect, yes. So you should know what marquee tools you used and what it's used for. You also used a couple of the lasso tools, which again is for selection. I think you used a brush tool in lesson 1. So you should know a little bit about that. You probably use the move tool. That's the one that looks like the 2 arrows. So you should know what that tool is. And you should also start to know what that shortcut key is to access it. So if I want to access the move tool, I hit V on my keyboard. If I want to access the eyedropper tool, do you remember what key that is? It is I, yes. If you want to access the brush tool, do you remember what key that is? B. So some of them are self-explanatory. B for brush, and I for the eyedropper. The V for the move tool. That's because the M is set aside for the marquee. Okay, so we got that. I want you to know the default colors in Photoshop, foreground, background. And by default, so if I hit D on my keyboard, it's gonna swap. So let's say I have just colors chosen here, right? If I hit D on my keyboard, it's gonna put my fill color, my foreground color, and my background color back to the default. And by default, it's black as your foreground color and white as your background color. Do you remember if I hover over it, it's gonna tell me? So I want you to know that. I want you to know by default, what are those colors? We talked about what the little arrow means, so we should be good on that. And that's pretty much it. So being able to identify some of those tools, specifically the move tool, marquee tool, lasso tool, and brush tool. And I guess the eyedropper tool as well. What some of their shortcut letters are to access them. And then a couple of those shortcut keys. Command D will do what? Deselect. Command Z will undo. Command plus will, I guess it's control. Control minus will zoom out. Good. And if you haven't finished lesson 1, make sure you finish that for Wednesday. Go ahead and start working on lesson 2 then. That's it for today. You guys are free to go. I understand you probably have math next door, so go ahead and get settled in over there. Hopefully that's starting to get a little bit easier, more comfortable, or understand what that's like at any point in time. If something's not working out, let me know and I can get something solved for you. And then you'll see Erin in here this afternoon. Have a good rest of your day. Haley, if you don't need anything from me, you are free to sign out.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.